Hello everybody and welcome to Amphlett Reviews, back on another Japanese deep dive into sequel territory now. I'm currently going through the V Cinema Essentials collection from Arrow Video, and I mentioned on my previous video for Zoom Goes the Bullet Neo Chinpira that they did do a sequel which I didn't realise, and then I looked into it more and it's a direct continuation from the events of the first film. I thought, I gotta check that out, I gotta try and find it, and unfortunately it wasn't part of the original V Cinema collection, which I expect they might do it on a potential secondary box set if this one does well. So it's a bit of a shame. Neo Chinpira Zoom Goes the Bullet 2, directed by Banmei Takahashi, released in 1991, 1 year after the first film, and continues and picks up where the first film left off, with our main character walking very slowly on that bridge. It's a very appropriate, very funny, and very fitting ending to that character in terms of his journey for that first film. The idea of him slowly walking on that bridge with a big trench coat, with the sunglasses, you know, and just kind of walking to an uncertain kind of path, essentially. You know, he's kind of accepted his fate. You know, he's going to do it. He's got the target. He's been assigned to basically go and assassinate someone and take the fall for 10 years, go to prison, and he's going to do a slow walk, epic slow motion style with the kind of the images from the photo booth he did at the end of the film, which is very much a kind of a wink and a nod to those kind of true crime, kind of, you know, true based on true story Yakuza films, which they have more, you know, prison mug shots, where in this time around he's just doing poses and kind of, you know, stands kind of thing from a photo booth, which he did previously in their previous scene, which I thought was very funny. And it's a very bittersweet ending, very much in tone to what the film's kind of comedy and the themes of the film's been talking about. And as mentioned in my previous video for the first film, I thought it was really good. I think it was really smart, really funny. It definitely had some good artistic kind of art house kind of feel towards it. It definitely kind of touched into some of his kind of pink territory, while also being a bit of a wink and a nod to the traditional kind of Yakuza kind of format, and having a character and a couple being young and kind of, you know, very 90s in its attitude, and just having this kind of persona of being a macho kind of, you know, Yakuza character, someone who is, you know, saying lines which no one believes, and just having that kind of fake kind of persona, which is just not cut out for that work and not cut out for that line of kind of job. I was very nervous and very worried that the kind of sequel would kind of not understand what made the first film work, and I thought it would be a bit of a departure, and would it go one way or the other? Would it go too far in one direction? Would it kind of lose the characters in its translation? You know, what kind of movie would you do as a follow-up? And, you know, is there a story to kind of continue here? Is there more you can tell with these characters in this world that's been separate in the first film? Because the first film, I think, is just perfect within its kind of isolated kind of, you know, bubble in time. You know, where do you go from that? You know, and it definitely seems seamless in terms of the costumes, with the look, the hairstyles, where the characters are. There is a bit of a time jump in terms of a couple of months. Basically, his uncle tips off the kind of the target. The target gets out of Dodge, essentially, from the location where he's meant to be at, and basically the Yakuza kind of family are basically saying, okay, he's not here, but it doesn't mean your duties are kind of ended, essentially. You know, we want you to go after him, find him, or how long it takes, go and find him, go and chase after. This leads to Junko to a hotel, basically does try and shoot and kill the target from the rival Yakuza family. It doesn't kill him, but basically just injure him quite severely in terms of a friction bullet bouncing off the wall, essentially. Basically, Junko's character doesn't take the fall, doesn't go to prison, but instead being told to basically run, go and hide out for basically 3 to 4 months, and come back, and then hopefully the heat will die down, essentially. And this is a kind of a change of plan to what was set up in the first film, and he's basically gone away from the location, the people and the family, everyone he's known, for basically 3 to 4 months. He's been working at kind of like a gas station, cleaning windows, and just kind of living low, and, you know, scrambling for kind of cash and food, and just after 3 to 4 months, Junko's character comes back to his kind of home turf, and things have changed, things have altered, characters have moved on, people have gone higher up in the world. You know, the location where he was staying and sleeping at, this kind of like demolished kind of building, is actually being demolished, so he no longer has a home anymore, and he's kind of trying to find his kind of love interest, essentially. The one thing he's kind of constantly thinking about and wants to get back to is this kind of booming, blossoming kind of love interest that he basically left behind, and he didn't get a resolution, he didn't get a finish, he just basically walked out because he knew he was going to accept a fate potentially in prison, and he never told her what was going to happen. And he's, throughout the entire film, he's basically coming to terms with his kind of status as a Yakuza kind of hitman, which, you know, a bit of a botched job by the end, it didn't quite work out, his position within the family and his direction going forward. He's just not too sure what he wants to do. And this journey, I think, comes full realization, full force in the second film, which I really do appreciate in terms of the pacing, because it isn't again, an action film. It is a little less in terms of its comedy, and surprisingly a lot less in terms of its kind of Pink style kind of sensibilities. It definitely is a bit more of a straighter kind of sequel, still having some of that humor in places, still having some of the bits that I do recognize within the first film in terms of the cinematography and the art house style, but it definitely plays a bit more serious, but to a good effect in terms of treating these characters and the supporting characters, which get a lot more screen time this time around, which I think is really good, fleshing them out and seeing what happened after the events. Giving it a little bit more agency, there's a lot more character development this time around, and you can tell he's grown and changed. He's a lot more respectful of women compared to who he was in the first film. He's still a bit cheeky, a bit mischief, and he's definitely doing a few things he probably shouldn't be. But I like the fact that he's just a bit more kind-hearted, he's a bit more nicer. And through his search for finding his kind of girlfriend, his love interest, he comes across a woman from the same location as in the first film in terms of this kind of escort kind of bar service. A new character is introduced and played by Sho Aikawa, which is a relatively unknown Japanese actress. I don't really know anything about her in terms of outside of this film. I think she's in a limited amount of films anyway, but she's a new character in this film, and she's an important role that takes place in this in terms of Junko's character and what he does with her, essentially, in that kind of conversation, the kind of daytime sequence they have, and the bit of a connection that does take place. And basically through her situation, what's going on with her in terms of her journey, Junko understands a bit more about himself. He's definitely a lot more honest, a bit more respectful towards women, and he basically genuinely does care, genuinely wants to help her and wants to put her on the right path, and understands her kind of her troubles, and basically says, okay, I'm willing to help you out. I'm willing to go to the location to kind of support you. And, he's willing to kind of be a bit more sensitive this time around. And this was hinted in the first film anyway, in terms of some of the things he says and does. He sounds like a girl. He sounds like, someone who isn't a hardened hitman kind of character, Yakuza character. And I think that's a really cool key relationship, because he is trying to find his love interest. This isn't a love replacement. It's just someone he can connect with and have a bit of understanding, because he doesn't know where she is, essentially. So this woman is someone he can help and support and get her on her good path, and I think that's really important. And I especially like how that kind of concludes within the kind of after credit bit after the film, which I think was quite interesting, quite different, and I think it definitely adds something to the film which I was not really expecting. Again, as mentioned, a lot of the supporting characters have changed as well, and their position in the world in terms of the Yakuza organization, in terms of they've gone higher up. There's various kind of characters that have different positions now, or have different placements, and I like the fact that the two kind of other Yakuza kind of hitman characters that were in the first two films, they have a bit of a continuation, they have a bit of an interesting kind of arc, which I quite appreciated and liked, and I thought that was quite cool. The Junko character definitely has a lot more to do this time around, that connects with Junko, and he's someone, again, very hard and very kind of, sort of old school seasonal, and someone who doesn't want his nephew essentially going through, the old ways like he did. And that takes a bit of an interesting turn, and it becomes quite important towards the late second act going into the third act, where it gets a lot more serious and a bit more darker. Definitely plays a bit more on some of the action moments, and definitely willing to step up and really take arms within that third act, which I thought was quite interesting and quite different compared to the first film. It's definitely nice to see that kind of transformation for a kind of a character and a performer, and it all comes ahead within that third act of the film. I would still say keep your expectations quite low in terms of gun shootouts and kind of violence, because there isn't as much that you would expect within a traditional type of film. But I think the journey to get to those moments, to get to those scenes, definitely pay off, are definitely well handled, and I think it's a really interesting kind of, again, a bittersweet dark ending, similar to the first film. The actress on the love interest, played by Shikako is not much in this film as I expected. She definitely plays a bit more of a smaller role compared to the first one this time around. I like the fact that character is very concerned and very worried for the Junko's safety, and the fact that she did kind of elaborate and sort of knew maybe that Junko was going to go after someone in terms of, doing a Yakuza kind of hit and potentially go away for quite some time. She doesn't know what's happened. She doesn't know if she's succeeded. She doesn't know if he's dead or in prison. She doesn't got a clue. And she's very grateful for the time that she had with him. And there was that kind of longing for each other, and that kind of, unfinished business or unresolved. And she basically goes to the kind of the head of the kind of Yakuza family and basically says, have you seen him? Where is he? What's happened to him? And, she's grateful for the time they've had, but she kind of accepts that maybe that was over. Maybe that was short-lived. And through a series of kind of, impulses, essentially, she kind of gets involved with the Yakuza kind of head boss, the kind of the big boss character, and basically she kind of is the essentially a girlfriend to him. And, you know, he's obviously enjoying the fruits of that kind of, you know, youth, and she's enjoying the kind of using the pistol and, you know, using, you know, just the kind of blase kind of, you know, free-spirited kind of life that she's in. You know, she gets the kind of a bit of the luxury, she gets the kind of the food, she gets the kind of this fine dining, and, you know, she gets the freedom to do what she wants. But she just, you know, happened to be seeing the kind of the head of the Yakuza boss, and obviously the Yakuza boss is a bit of a snake and a bit of a kind of a slime ball, and someone who's very much taking advantage of the situation, and, you know, knows full well what's happened to this character, and obviously wanting to kind of use this woman for his own means. And I like the fact that it does have a payoff towards the third act. She's very limited in the film. She does appear here and there, but she's not used for any kind of smutty kind of, you know, pink sensibilities, which I think is quite impressive and very restrained. They could have very easily done that. They could have easily thrown in those sequences to annoy you as an audience, or to kind of, you know, beef up the film in terms of the kind of, you know, rating. But no, they hold back. They had a bit more of a serious kind of angle this time around in terms of her character. And I like the fact that kind of theme between her kind of getting excited and kind of, you know, being memorized by the kind of the pistol and firing it does have some sort of a payoff towards the third act of this film, which I thought was quite good. And I like the conclusion ultimately with her, even though it's a bit more of a bittersweet, darker kind of ending that I would have expected. I think it definitely comes full circle. There is that resolution, there is that kind of resolve between her and Junko's character, and the film ends, it's done, it's finished. And I think it's just, you know, this life of being a Yakuza, as mentioned within the first film, and even more so in this film, you know, you're not cut out to be Yakuza. Why would you want to be? Why would you want to go through this? And that is demonstrated multiple times within Junko's kind of storyline, within the supporting characters as well, in terms of the things they have to do to kind of get to the high position, you know, the rival kind of Yakuza families. I'd like to see the third entry. I'd like to see where the character would have ended up being in terms of, you know, by the end of the film. But I think it's a very appropriate ending, and I think it ends on a very bittersweet kind of ending. Ultimately, it's a very uncertain future. We don't know where he's going to go. We don't know what he's going to do. But we only hope for the best for this character. And so what are your thoughts and opinions on Neo Chinpira 2? The Zoom Goes the Bullet. Love to know your thoughts and opinions. Please comment down below. So in time, guys, I'm for reviews. Signing out.